statistically relevant to the past. And of course, when we think about the markets and statistical relevancy, well, we always have to factor in we are using past data to try to get a gauge off of what could happen in the future. As of the session itself here, of course, past performance no guarantee of future results, but nonetheless, when you have broad indices, when you have broad market participants, we can at least find statistical relevancies, and that's the important thing to always keep in mind. On I always remember a quote that often sticks out to me from my college days in political science and things to that degree, is that all models are wrong, but some are useful, and that's the important thing to think about when we're thinking about spreadsheets and the components of statistical relevancies. We have to make some assumptions, but what can we garner as far as the information goes with that approach? So again, like I mentioned, joined by my colleague Jacob Ellis here today. How is your day going so far there, Jake?
Great start to the day. Great start to the week. I got to start it off with the good folks in the morning market brief first thing today. So always a fun start to the day. And now we get to talk a little bit about Excel, one of my pet passions here. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in and take a look. We're going to start off today and actually work exclusively from Fidelity.com and then in Microsoft's Excel platform. I've got this pulled up and already logged into our test account here on Fidelity.com. I'd encourage you to follow along as much as you can, or at least to take some good notes. As much as we would love to provide you something to walk away with in terms of the actual file that we're about to create, that is not an option. So unfortunately, you will need to do the clicks yourself. I'll try to do it at a speed that you can follow along, but do your best and we'll work through it. Send in your questions and we'll try to save all of those towards the end and we will answer all of them to the best we can. So here we are logged on to Fidelity.com. I'm going to come up here to news and research and we're going to come halfway down the list to stocks. When we're on the stocks menu, this is where you can find all sorts of details. But today we're going to focus actually on the very first button available, screener tools. We're going to click on the screener and specifically to start a stock screen, though you could also screen for ETFs and other items here. On our stock screen, what we're going to do is pull up some details. And you know what? I neglected to have this ready to go. I intended to show you this is what we are going to be building today so that you can see kind of the end from the beginning. Here we go, loading it up. Let's see. There we are. So this is our finished product. It's going to look something like this with a list of all the sectors available in the S&P 500, their respective weights in the S&P 500, the industries that make up a given sector, and even those stocks that are represented within the sector as well. So all sorts of details. We'll be able to customize these columns based on whatever is of interest to you when you make your own version of this. So we'll walk you through what you should do and what you should not so that you understand the clicking, and then you can choose how you would like to analyze. This is more a how-to on building this type of a guide using the stock screener. So we're going to start up here at Fidelity.com. And I have come to the stock screener and we're going to start fresh. We're going to come over here to the left-hand side and we're going to start adding some different criteria to narrow down what we see, as well as to add these to our list. One way we can do that is use this little search field here. I started typing in market capitalization, and here's the first one. When we click it, it adds the column over here to the right, adding it as an additional piece of information, but all of the same 9,000 stocks are still presented to us. Whereas if we were to go in and, for example, scroll down here to basic company facts and index, when I add this one and then check the box for S&P 500, now we are only looking at the 504 stocks from the S&P 500, but notice that my market capitalization column still exists. It didn't filter, but it is added as additional information. So you get to decide whether or not you want these to show up on the list or not, and whether you want to limit what is visible as a result. So we've got now our market capitalization, we've got the index, Now I want to add a few other criteria that will be required in order to build this the way that we've got it set up. We're going to scroll down just a ways and click on sector, industry, and sub-industry to add this as well. We've got now our security price, the market capitalization index, the sector, industry, and sub-industry option. And then we're going to come down here to dividend yield. We've added dividend yield. Several of these I've just been scrolling down since they're amongst the most popular. That's an easy way to access it. But again, the search criteria or view all options are easy ways to find things as well. I'm going to add the price divided by the trailing 12-month earnings, or in other words, the PE ratio. We'll add that one on here. And we'll call this good enough as a starting point. Again, this is not a recommendation that these are the right things for you to look at, but rather how you could look at anything available. If you come down here to this view all menu, you'll see that there are dozens and dozens of filterable criteria available to you here using the stock screener. I'm still going, haven't made it to the bottom of the list quite yet. There we are. So a lot of information available for you. I've chosen these three almost at random, but we'll go ahead and use them as our starting point for an analysis. Now, after creating this, it's important that you save it. Number one, because it will save you time and effort when you revisit this in the future, but it also will help make sure that the following steps that we take in Excel are consistent across the board, making it that much easier. So go ahead and come up here to save my screens, save to my screens. And then I've put this in here. I already saved a version of this earlier. I'm going to go ahead and save over it, but you type in whatever name you would like, and then you hit save, and it will save this information. To be clear, it is only saving the filtered criteria. The results, everything here in the middle, including any sorting that you may do, is not saved. This will be based on what's present in the market at that time. I am going to sort it by the largest market capitalization, so we have them in that order. That's actually because when we go up here to the top right, download results, this is going to download only the top 500 results. When we export this to Excel, it's only going to include 500 results. That means by sorting by market capitalization, we'll have trimmed off the bottom 4 smallest companies by market capitalization. If that bothers anybody, now you know that's what we have chosen to do. All right, when we click download results, it will ask, do we want to include just the search criteria, or do we want to include any of these other facets? I'm just going to use search criteria today, and we'll hit continue. When we do, depending on your browser, you'll see a little download of screener_results.xls. If you open it up, you will be brought to your downloads folder, and you will have that in there. Now, the next step is important. I'm going to go ahead and move that from the downloads folder instead to some other place. You could put it for right now onto your desktop. You can put it wherever it is you see fit. I've created already a folder that I've named Ready to Excel, and I just dragged that screener results file right in here right now. But believe it or not, we are actually not going to open this file. In fact, I never open this file. I'm going to create a brand new one. If you're on a Windows machine, you can usually just right-click and hit New and then open a brand new Excel worksheet as a shortcut. But you can open Excel and then go ahead and run this if you will. But we'll go ahead and say this is our class demo 624. And we'll hit Enter, and we'll open that up. This is a blank worksheet without any information on it so far, but we're going to go ahead and fill it in with a lot of information. First, we are going to create a connection to our screener results file by using what is called Power Query. This is a feature in Excel, which is phenomenal. So we're going to come up here to the Data tab, Data. Then we're going to go to the left-hand side to Get Data. from File, from Excel Workbook. I know that was several clicks all at once, so I'll give you just a moment. Data, get data from File, Excel Workbook. When I click on that, it asks me what I want to find. And so I'm going to go back into that same folder I was just working with, my Ready to Excel, and the screener results, which you can see is the one that I just downloaded moments ago. I hit import, and it's going to bring up an import wizard that's going to help me decide what to bring in from that file. Specifically, it will have identified that there is a search criteria table within it. And if I click on it, hey, yeah, that's exactly what I would expect. Microsoft right up here at the top, followed shortly by Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, and others. All of these listed right here. And if I scroll to the side, it appears to have brought in all the different criteria that we were looking at. If I hit load, then it will bring this as a connection into my file. This file, the class demo file that I just created, is the one you're going to use to actually connect. But anytime you want to update it, what you will do is go ahead and download that data from the stock screener. Then you will save over the previous. And I'll show you that here in just a moment. But this connection is what allows this to be easily reusable over time. We're not going to do much messing around with this particular table, but I did want to point out a few things. First, maybe we can get the size a little bigger here. Let's go ahead and zoom in on it. And we notice that this column, for some reason, is very, very wide. If I go all the way to the bottom of the document, we see that it's because it includes all sorts of sentences, some disclosures included, including a date from which we downloaded this. Those are helpful and useful in their own right, but in our use case, we are going to go ahead and delete them right away so that we can start off with it instead. That's not the only problem with the downloaded data as we received it. If I come over here to the side, we notice that our market capitalization is actually a $ and then the market cap and a T or a B or an M, depending on whether it's a trillion, billion, or $1 million market cap security. That's great for reading. It's not great for math, and we're going to be doing some math with it. So if I want to add 3 and 3, it should give me 6, but if I add this plus this, it gives me an error instead currently in Excel. So we're going to make some changes to that column. If I scroll over to the right, we also see that our dividend yield looks sort of right, 0.66, except that 0.66 is 66%. No stock is paying you a 66% dividend without being highly suspect. That is not the case here. Rather, it needs to be divided by 100, so it's an appropriate percentage format. And a couple other little nitpicky things, like this price to earnings column, which has a few little dashes here when there is not data available. So we're going to go ahead and correct each of those issues by opening up the Power Query menu. When we made the connection, we chose to click Load at the bottom. We could have clicked Transform Data, and that would have brought us to the same screen we're about to see. If we go ahead and do so now, we have a few options. We can either come down here to Table, right-click Table, then Edit Query, or if you still have this Queries and Connection menu open, you can right-click on it and choose to edit the query right here as well. I will go ahead and do that. And now we have the actual Power Query editor up in front of us. It looks rather similar to our Excel sheet itself, giving us all the same details. Let's start with the simplest of the fixes that we needed to do, and that was to remove the rows at the very bottom. I already counted these in advance so that we didn't need to, but if I click on this remove row option, it gives me the ability to remove the bottom rows. And specifically, I would like to remove the bottom 17 rows is how many will get rid of everything that's unnecessary here. 17 rows taken off the bottom. Just like that, it's creating a source of steps applied to our original document and then transforming it step by step until it gives us our final output. And it will do this every time we update the data. That's the important part. This is giving it steps on how to read this so that it shows up in the format that we want. I've removed those bottom rows. let's take care of a couple of those other items. The next one was going to be by fixing up this market capitalization column. Here, we're going to do our most advanced steps for anybody who hasn't done some programming before, but that's okay. Follow along. You will be all right. What I'm going to do is click on transform, and I'm going to go ahead and click on add column, and I'm going to click on custom column. Here, I'm going to name my column, whatever it is that you would like. In my case, I'm just going to type out in all caps, market cap, lumped together there in abbreviated format. Market cap, and that formula for that cell is going to be typed out, and this is not in usual Excel format of a function. Instead, this is typed in a programming language called DAX, D-A-X, if you want to do some research on it later on. So what we need to type in here is for each of the values, if, and we're going to access the text character, if the text ends with, what text are we going to look at? Let's look at everything in the market capitalization column, our existing market capitalization column. And we're going to see if that happens to end with a T. That's what we're checking for. If that ends with a T, then what are we going to do? We're going to read that as a number, and we're going to take that as a number from the text start. And what are we looking at our text? Again, our market capitalization. How much of the text do we want to look at? It's saying take only the starting part of our market capitalization. We're going to go ahead and take our market capitalization, and we're going to access the text length. Again, of that same market capitalization column. And we're going to take that length and subtract 1 from it. Essentially, we're saying, give me all of the characters except for the T at the end. So give me all the rest of it except for the T. I'm going to close up my parentheses. And then I'm going to multiply that number by 1,000, million, billion, trillion. $1 trillion. Perfect. That's what we need to do, but we also need to repeat this same idea for billions and for millions. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this. And now I'm going to go ahead and say else, meaning otherwise, if it's not ending with a T, then if instead it ends with a B, well, then do all the same stuff. Grab me all of it except for the last characters. And now instead of multiplying by 1 trillion, we're only going to multiply by 1 billion. And if it's not that, then I'll paste it in one more time. If it ends with a million, an M, then we're going to go ahead and erase this until it's timesing it by 1 million. That's going to give us our appropriate numeric values. If for some reason we get something that shows up in this that's neither a T or a B or an M, let's see, it's giving me just a little bit of a break there. There we go. Then we're going to say else null, meaning just give me no answer if it can't do any of that. All right, if it does all of those things, then we're in good shape. We'll go ahead and click OK and see if that turns out the way we expected. Indeed, it did turn this into a number, and it's recognizing and reading this as a scientific value, but it is showing us 12 zeros after the 3, which would be $3 trillion for our largest securities, and then slightly smaller and smaller as we got into those that were with a billion. So that's all we needed to do in order to do so. That's the only time we're going to use that DAX information this time around, but I know that's a lot to go through. That's okay. Everything else from here is going to be done in the regular Excel features, or right here with a little bit more of a click and drag format. So there were a couple other things that we recognized needed to get fixed. In our dividend yield, for example, we see that there are some null values, things that don't have a dividend. But if something doesn't have a dividend, it's reasonable for us to say that they don't pay a dividend. So let's go ahead and fix this, going to our Transform tab up here at the top and hitting Replace Values. When I hit Replace Values, it's going to ask what I want to replace in the column I have selected. Let me select my dividend yield and hit Replace Values. We're going to replace null with 0. They're not paying any dividend. And when I do that and hit OK, here it is showing up as done. Next, we'll go in and say, all right, we want to turn this into an appropriate percent format. And to do that, we needed to divide it. Click Standard, then Divide. Divide that entire column by 100. When we do so, now we've got 0.0066, or if I made this look like a percent, we would see this is the appropriate type of number that we truly expected. So all of this is starting to line up exactly as we wanted, folks, getting a little closer. We fixed our market capitalization column, we fixed our dividend yield, but we also needed to fix up our price to earnings ratio, which had a couple of those dashes represented here when there was no value. Now, up until now, I've told you these were reasonable things that I've been doing. This next thing I am doing is not reasonable. What I'm going to do is anytime there is a dash dash here, I'm going to replace it with 0. We don't expect that these companies actually have a 0 price to earnings ratio, but perhaps it would be reasonable instead for us to manually fill these in using a specific average, maybe using the current S&P 500 price to earnings ratio, or looking at their historic information, or finding a separate data source that does have access to the price earnings ratio on that specific company. But I'm going to replace it with 0 today just for sake of time so that we can go ahead and get through all of our presentation. But we've now fixed up all of our dashes have been replaced with a 0 value, but it still does think that our column is a set of letters, and that's just not the case. So we're going to go ahead and switch this up and tell it, no, this is actually a decimal number, and now it's sliding it over here to the right, putting it in italics, and that's why it's over here to the right-hand side. Now we could do any sort of mathematical operation with it that we would like to, and we're in good shape. So folks, that was the big fixes that we needed to do on here in order to be able to work with this. When we're satisfied with the changes we've made, we could certainly scroll back through these by clicking on any one of them and see what the data looked like at that time, or come all the way through to the final step to see everything we've done. When you're satisfied, go ahead and hit home and then close and load. Close and load is essentially saying, let's refresh this data source. Now we're finally back on a page that's big enough you can hopefully read this text. I wish I could have made it larger on those previous screens. But here we've got it ready to go. And if I scroll over to the right, we can see the evidence of the changes we've made. For example, 0 dividend showing up for Amazon. And our market capitalization column ready to go in mathematical ready formats. But you'll notice that the formatting that when we told it to be a percent for the dividend yield does not carry over. So I always go back in and change this so I can see it as a percent. I like to see 2 decimals on my dividend percent yields, but now we've got that all ready and visible to us. This again is not necessarily going to carry over to the columns that we're working with, but if it's any page you're going to use regularly, make sure you use the percentage or other formatting options right up here to make it a little bit easier to recognize the appropriate numbers. But with that data all plugged in, suppose it occurs to you that you forgot, you meant to include something else as well. Well, let's jump back over to the stock screener and say, you know what? In addition to those, I also wanted to have the price performance. Well, let me go ahead and grab that as well. Coming down here to our criteria, I can click price, performance, and we're going to grab performance year to date. Let's see how well these companies have been performing. That's now added as an additional criteria here. Again, since you're going to want to reuse this in the future, I encourage you to click Save to My Screens. I'll go ahead and type in again the name of mine. I'll hit Save to overwrite it. And now we are in business. This is going to be saved and ready to go. But when I download the results, search criteria is what I'm going to download, and I hit continue. Again, that put this screener results into my downloads folder, but I don't want it in my downloads folder. I want it instead to be moved into my specific folder where I'm working with. That's going to ask me if I want to replace the old one with this new one. And I do. I absolutely want to override the old information with this newly updated version. So having updated that file alone, all I did was download it and save over the old one. This, the one we've been working in, stays the same. It doesn't have that extra column in here. But if I right-click on the table and hit refresh, it will rerun all the steps involved in our original Power Query, still leaving our dividend yield formatted appropriately. We've got our price to earnings ratio formatted appropriately. We have our market capitalization, but now we also see a price performance column. Now, this is another one that represents percents, and therefore we need to go ahead and make some of those same changes. So again, steps to get to the Power Query editor. Easiest way is to right-click anywhere on the table, come to the table option, and then edit query. That's how easy it is, folks, to either add new information to this or simply to update the information because the prices have changed. You want to see what else is going on in your securities. We need to make the same changes as we did for our dividend yield to our market, to our price performance category. So here it thinks this is a set of letters for some reason. I'll tell it it's instead numerical. And then we're going to come here to transform standard. We're going to divide it by 100. Since we've now learned that changing this to be a percent format doesn't persist and show it on the other page, I don't typically bother with adjusting the formatting here on this particular page. But I'm happy now with the changes we've made. We'll click close and load, and presto changeo, folks. Now our price performance is appropriately divided by 100. We'll format this one to look appropriate with 1 decimal place, perhaps would be ideal in this case. There we've got our 155% positive return from NVIDIA, and a few others falling short of that, at least in relative terms. One right here, 26%, is Tesla, unfortunately, moving the wrong direction so far this year. But now we've got a whole lot of data, enough that I hope you feel comfortable with this part. But now let's turn it into that usable dashboard. I'm going to come down here to the other sheet of Excel. I'm going to rename this dashboard. You can do that by double-clicking there on the sheet title. And then I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to come down a couple rows. Specifically, I'm going to start here on the 4th row, and I'll zoom in again so we can see it a little easier. On the 4th row, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my titles so you don't have to watch me type these in. But the titles that we're looking for are the sector, index weight, the number of stocks, weighted dividend yield, and then the price to earnings ratio. I'm going to format it up just a little bit. We had chosen this brownish color here as the background, and then we'll use white text to make sure that stands out. And I find that for my headers, I usually prefer a bolded font. But when I've done that, I notice that my column headers are just a little bit off skew. We'll go ahead and center this up just like that. With a few clicks, we've got it looking quite a bit better, a little more palatable. But here on cell A5 is where we're going to start our actual formulas in Excel. So here we're going to say, let's go ahead and access the table on the other page, which is named search criteria. So we're going to say equals search criteria, and then an open brackets. And it gives us all sorts of options listed here. Specifically, we're looking for the sector. We'll close our brackets and hit enter, and it gives us the entire list of all 500 sectors pulled in directly from the other page. I don't really need it in this format. In fact, all I want is one entry for each of them. So I'm going to wrap our formula here inside of the formula unique. By putting that inside unique, now I have only one entry for all 11 of those sectors. So beautifully limited down to what we wanted. And since I'm a little bit of a organization required type guy, I'm going to wrap that one more time, this case inside of the sort function. Sort all the unique values from our search criteria of sector, and we'll hit enter. Now we have them in alphabetical order. They will always be in this same order, all 11 sectors ready to go. So that's what we're going to be working with. That accessing of the search criteria table will happen again and again and again. So you're going to get plenty of practice with that right now. In the cell B5, we're going to go ahead and measure this out and say B5 is equal to the sum of what? We want to find the weighting of these characteristics. So that's going to be the market capitalization. But I can't look at all of the market capitalization. I only want the market capitalization of the companies that are in the communication services sector. So I'm going to add up all of the filtered search criteria market capitalization. Remember to use your new version of the market capitalization, the one I did in all caps, as opposed to market capitalization, which is the one with letters. Using market capitalization, what do we want to include from that long list of all of the market capitalizations? Only those where the search criteria sector is equal to our sector on this line. If we do that and close this up and hit enter, this gives us the total market capitalization of each company added together. That's useful and can tell us the overall market capitalization. In fact, it would tell us that down here, information technology is $15 trillion. But instead, we want to see this in a percentage format. So we're going to take this value that we've already got and divide it by all of the market capitalization. To make that a little bit easier, I'm going to come back to our search criteria table. I'm going to go to the very bottom and very end. You can navigate to the end of something by holding the control and pushing the arrows in one direction or another. But here we've got it all the way to the end. And if I come up here to table design, it gives me an option to add a total row. Table design, total row. Table design will only be visible if you've selected somewhere on the body of the table. But when I did that, it added in a total row below all of my data, and it's smart enough to guess I probably want a sum, add up all of the value of the market capitalization right here. But if it didn't guess right for whatever reason, you click the little arrow and you choose it for yourself. You can choose the average or count only the numbers, whatever it is that you're interested in. I'm going to use the sum function. Coming back over here to our dashboard, we've got our total market capitalization for the sector, but we need to divide that now by our search criteria, open brackets, and then a number sign. And that tells us we can choose from totals as one of the options, which is what we want. I want the totals, close bracket, then a comma, open bracket, market cap, and then I'm going to close brackets. There was supposed to be 2 open brackets here, 2 square open brackets at the start. So search criteria, double open bracket, totals, comma, open brackets for market cap, close, all of that. And then we finished our formula. Okay. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and add in a spot where you can see that formula text. That's the formula that we've put into this spot right here if you need to grab a screenshot of it. But that's our index weighting for that sector. If I go ahead and copy that down to all the cells right here and format them as a percent, maybe with 1 decimal, this looks about right. A little more than 30% in information technology, 10% or so in several of the others, and 3 of them down here at just 2%. This looks correct to me. If you weren't quite sure, you could add them up and find that, yes, indeed, they add up to 100%. So we've done our math correctly. We arrived at the right values. Next, we want to go ahead and take a look at how many stocks are represented in each one. Now, this is going to be sort of similar to the previous formula, but it's going to be a little simpler, thank goodness. Here, we're going to say we want to count, and the normal count function, it explains to us, only counts the numbers, the cells that have numbers. So instead, we're going to use count A, which means count all of them. Count it if it's not blank. Count A, what are we going to count? We're going to count from that search criteria table. Why don't we use the symbol field representing the stock name? Why don't we go ahead and get that ticker symbol? And we need to filter that down as we have before. Maybe I'll start back here from count A. We're going to count the filtered list of search criteria and we're going to use the symbol. And what do we want to filter? What do we want to narrow it down? Again, we're going to say only those where the search criteria of sector is equal to our sector on that line. If that's the case, then add them up for me. I can close out all my parentheses and hit enter, and it tells me I have 20 stocks in communication services. And if I drag that down across the entire list, we see these values across all the different. Again, if you weren't quite certain you got it right, add them up. Indeed, you should get 500 if you used the list of at least 500 stocks from the stock screener. Next, weighted dividend yield. Here is our hardest formula, folks, in terms of the Excel stuff we're going to do. I'm going to work it out here line by line for you, but I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. I'll do that in a minute, I guess. I'll leave that there for you in case you need it. But here, we'll go ahead and type in that we want to add up the sum of, again, our filtered down list. And what are we filtering for this time? This time we are going to filter and find our dividend yields. From the search criteria, open brackets, dividend yield. By typing in there our dividend yield, now we need to say, what do we want to include? We're only going to include, yet again, those where the search criteria of sector is equal to A5. That would give us all of the dividend yields. And that's sort of in the right realm of what we want, but not precisely. In fact, after filtering that down and adding them up, what we need to do is multiply this by the market capitalization of that company. So we need to now multiply that by, again, a filtered list. But now we're going to find the market capitalization. Remember to use your new formatted one, MKT market cap. Market cap. Where do we want to find the market cap? Which market caps? Only those where our search criteria, sector, where the sector matches our row. If we have done that, now we have the weight for each one of them, the final piece to get our weighted dividend yield, to understand how much our dividend would be across the sector, is to now go ahead and divide that by the total market capitalization of that sector. So previously we've been looking at it, each item multiplied by each other. That's what's happening right here, since each of those search criteria filter functions right here are returning a list. The list would be multiplied against each other on a line-by-line basis. Now we're going to divide that by the grand total. So our grand total here is going to be the sum of the filtered search criteria, search criteria, our market capitalization, not market capitalization, I almost missed my own advice, MKT cap, market cap, and we only want to use those from within our same sector. So for the last time, we're going to go ahead and type in search criteria, sector, close out those brackets, and type that equals our final line here. Now, if I manage to do that without any typos, then we should be good. But it looks like I've got at least one parenthesis out of place. Let me double check my formula over here. A5. It's right here. There we go. Okay. With all of that in, and I'll go ahead and now replace this to say our formula text for this one instead, which I know streams a long, long way off the screen. We'll go ahead and make this quite a bit wider and wrap the text for just a minute. Go ahead and grab a screenshot of this if you would like to go ahead and type that in and you missed something like I did along the way. I'll copy these down and format them as a percent in the meantime, showing our weighted dividends. And it does look like all told, we're in good shape. What we've done is taken the dividend yield for each component and then divided it into the whole. We're going to pick up the pace just a little bit to make sure I can get at least a good portion of these going. But believe it or not, we've done almost all of the hard work. From here on, we're just going to be modifying in slight ways this same formula. For example, to get our price to earnings ratio, I'm going to click on this cell and copy it and then paste it. Some of you more advanced individuals say, well, that's going to give us some problems, right? And it will. What we're going to do is, instead of copying it that way, also instead of copying sideways this way, neither of those will work. In this case, we actually need to go ahead and select the formula itself and then paste the formula over here. That's because of some of the intricacies in the way we put this together using this reference, but also our table. So all together, go ahead and just copy the formula and paste it into the new cell once you've done so. But the only change we actually need to make is right here where it says dividend yield. The only thing we need to change is, let's go ahead and take a look at the price to earnings ratio. Instead, when I do that and then copy this down to the bottom, now it thinks it's a percent. I'll go ahead and change that back to just a general number, and we don't need all those decimals. Here we've already got our price to earnings ratio. That's all it took, was the one minute change to have this in place. Very easy for us to do so. I'll go ahead and make our minor formatting right here, and we'll be ready to move on to our next step. All right. With our dividend yield in place, with our price to earnings ratio and that long formula already taken care of, we can move over and start creating our industry area. And to do so, I'm going to start up here at the top and just remind myself, all right, let's go ahead and choose a sector. And here we can have it reference anything from this list. To make it only be able to be one of the values in that list and even include a nice drop down, what you need to do is click on the Data tab, Data Validation, and then right here, change this to allow only a list of values. And the source, we can either select this area or I can just type it in A5 with a number sign after, says A5 and anything that A5 spills into, which in this case, you'll notice that when I select this one cell, it's giving me a little blue box around all of those because that all comes from this one cell. So now I've got a little drop-down box here that I can select any one of those values that I would like. So I can type in here communication services. Oh, let's see, something went wrong in the validation. Oh, it didn't recognize that. Here we go. Equals A5. There we go. Perfect. Now it gives us our nice little drop-down list showing us exactly what we're looking at. We'll start with communication services, and we'll come over here to the side where we can begin our work on our industry titles. Now, the industry titles will be based on whatever categories you decided are most of interest to you as you worked through and decided what to download. Those that I happen to include are going to be very similar to the previous, so I won't spend much time typing them out. But let's start now by making our list of the industries that make up the sector that we're looking at. To do so, I'm going to go ahead and now narrow this back in here and say, all right, our industry, we want the sorted, unique list filtered down of all of this industries. So search criteria, industry, get me all of the industries where the search criteria sector is equal to, not the same line, but rather we want to find the ones that match up here at the top. All the ones up here at the top. It will add in my final parentheses, and indeed, it got me the 5 different industries that are making up the communication services. We can format this just a little bit to make it a little easier to read. We'll jump in here, make that font white and bold, and maybe just like this as well, wrapping that text. All right, that's going to look just a little bit better. We'll expand out our industry label and we're ready to go. It has already got some of the neat dynamic functionality I showed you before. By go ahead and changing our list up here at the top, it will dynamically update this list to show all of the ones that happen to make part of that given sector. So let's go ahead and get started by showing our market capitalization column. This is going to be very similar to what we did on these previous ones. The only difference is instead of filtering by sector, now we need to filter by the industry. So we're going to type this out and type it out just once, and then we'll be able to edit it in very quick fashion. So we're going to type out the sum of the filter of search criteria, market capitalization. We've got our market capitalization column. And what do we want? Which lines in that market capitalization? We want only the ones where our industry matches the beverages industry. So we're going to say where search criteria industry is equal to that current line item just there to the side. If we do that and go ahead and close up our parentheses, it gives us the value, but I've indicated I want this in billions of dollars because frankly, I don't like scientific notation. So I'm going to divide that by 1,000 million billion dollars. Now we know, all right, the beverages industry represents $600 billion, or the consumer staples is $1 trillion all told. Now with that column built in, we can start to see some of the dynamic information that's working out. Let's do one more column, and then we'll go ahead and make this change. Actually, we'll make this change now. If I come back up here to the staples and choose industrials, we notice that now I have more industries, and so I'd have to drag this down to include more. But if I go back to one that has less, like energy only has 2, suddenly I have this ugly error popping up. So Excel offers a function that can clean this up. We'll just wrap everything we've done so far with if error, right here at the start, if error, and then we come all the way to the end and put a comma, and we say, what do you want me to do if there's an error? I just want you to put a blank space there, just some quotation marks. So quotation, end quotation, and close the parentheses and hit enter. And now if I copy that down, since this is blank, it's going to go ahead and have an error, but we don't have to show the error. It can still look real nice. Next, under our weighted dividend column, we're able to go ahead and start reusing this formula a little bit more. We're going to say if error, we're going to use the sum of the filtered value for dividend yields from the search criteria, of course. Search criteria, dividend yield. I'll slide this over a little bit so we've got a little more space. Search criteria, dividend yield. And where do we want to find those? Only for the industry that we're working in. So only for our given industry, we're going to go ahead and say search criteria, industry. If that is the same as our current industry that we are looking at. If that's the case, then we can go ahead and make our next step. And for that, we're going to say, we're going to take the sum, we're going to divide that, let's see. I'm sorry, we're going to multiply that by the market capitalization of those same companies, just like we did before when we did this for our sector version. We're going to multiply this by the market cap let's see, we need to do it multiplied by the filtered version, filter of the search criteria industry where that is equal to, let's see. I apologize. I was getting myself a little bit mixed up right here. So what we're doing is we're adding up the dividend yields for all of those that have the right industry, and we're going to multiply that by their market capitalization. And we're only going to include market capitalization again for those where the search criteria of industry matches our current industry. And knowing that that's the case, we're going to divide that total by the, or divide that by the filtered search criteria where our industry matches is equal to our industry. Now, that's a lot all in here, and we're finishing out our if error there at the very tail end with a bunch of closed parentheses, finally some quotation marks, and hit enter. Let's see, somewhere in here, it has me missing one piece. We want to add up right here our market capitalization one more time. Okay, folks, there we are. I'll type this one up here at the top in extended format again. Let's say equals formula text. And we'll wrap that text right here and make it a little bit wider for us. Okay. With that extra space built in there for us, we can go ahead and copy this formula down, including it for all of those that exist, and verify that it is working across the board. Now that we have it all typed in here, if I change my sector to be information technology, we've got all of those rows populated with their relevant dividend yields. Like I told you, that was all of the hard part. We are technically only have 2 minutes left. Andrew, I think if the people are willing, I'm going to keep going a few steps further to make it to show everything that we promised. But as we work through on this, here's what we've got: our year-to-date return, our price to earnings ratio, and any other indication or value that you brought in. The only other step we need to do is, again, step over here, copy the formula, move it to this spot right here, to the cell that you want, and change it. Instead of being dividend yield, we're going to say instead we wanted that price performance is what this one was. Price performance, I plug that in and hit enter. And just like that, I've got the price performance already taken care of. One change and we're finished. Or if I paste it in here again and change this one instead to be the price to earnings ratio and hit enter, we've already got this up and running for all of these. Now, I would prefer to format this a little more beautifully if time permitted, but we're going to go ahead and forego the formatting fun and instead move on to how to get the list of the stocks so you can see that as well. But here we've got our communications equipment, all of these filtering through appropriately based upon the specifics that you've got on here. Unformatted percents are unacceptable though. All right, moving over, next one here, we've got our headers here for the column O, we're going to say that the columns here are going to be equal to the same cells right here. And remember, a little number sign after gives us that entire list. But that puts it top to bottom. I'd like it left to right. In order to rotate it like that, we call that a transposition. So we're going to use the transpose function on cell H5 number sign. And that will give us right here, and I'll put that right above it, equals formula text. That will give us our formulas across, or our industries across the top. And then for each of the different stocks, all we need to plug in here is one formula. And I'll go ahead and type this in pretty quickly. Again, we're going to use the if error function. If error, we're going to say, filter me all of the search criteria symbols. So give me the stock symbols if the search criteria industry matches the cell right above. Now, in this case, because of the way we've typed it left to right, it is important that we go ahead and lock in place our row so that it includes each of those along the way. Here we go. And that will close this out after saying quotes and enter. There we go. Okay. And we'll go ahead and add in the formula for that one. Equals this one. And that is it. Aside from making it much more beautiful, we have now finished everything we intended to, with one exception. Again, we're going to copy this and paste it over in order to have it move appropriately. Copy and paste on each of these rows. I'm doing it even where there's blank space, because if we switch over to a sector like industrials, it'll come all the way over here. I'll go ahead and do that and demonstrate. With a couple formulas like that, we've now got our full list of stocks from each of the different sectors, divided up and easy to digest for you. So, folks, I appreciate your patience. We ran a little bit longer this time than we did last time. It took me a little bit of extra time, I guess, along the way preparing. But thank you for sticking with me and following through. I'll continue playing around with this just a little bit, but I hope you've been able to get some value out of it. I know that overall, this represents a substantial amount of work for you to be able to follow along, and it's difficult. So if you got lost any step along the way, I apologize. We may have a chance to revisit this once or twice in the future again, but at least you got a starting point along it. Andrew, I saw you answered a few questions along the way. Was there anything that we needed to review? It looks like maybe a request for some of the formulas.
Yeah, there was a couple of requests for the formulas. The main question, of course, as you would imagine, is unfortunately, no, we cannot provide this Excel spreadsheet to everyone. Of course, we wish we could, but unfortunately not able to do so, nor is there a recording that is available for this session. The recording that you see there, it is for compliance purposes, but not for release purposes. So unfortunately, not able to, actually send out or distribute any of these pieces of information. But I know we're already a minute or so over time. Anything you wanted to add before we wrap up there, Jake?
No, let me go ahead and just make sure we've got all those formulas visible to people. And then actually, I've got my notes that I'll go ahead and share right in front of you. I know it's kind of small text. If you want to go ahead and grab a screenshot so you can follow through and fill these in, you're welcome to do so. This has everything that we did, as well as I attempted to put where you're supposed to place them. Hopefully you can piece that together. So here's the first half, and then I'll have to scroll down so you can get a screenshot of the rest. I'll give you just a moment to grab a screenshot of that if you would like. I use the shortcut on my screen of Windows key Shift S. Opens up the snipping tool. Maybe yours does the same, folks. Okay, and then I'm going to scroll down. Everything from here below is those formulas we just worked through presently. It also has a couple notes about using conditional formatting, which we did not discuss today. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining with us. We appreciate the chance to do so. Peter, I won't do a follow-on specific to this in this case, but we got close enough, showed all of the formulas. I think we're okay, but I do apologize. Maybe I just need to move a little quicker at the start, but I felt like I was losing a few people. You let me know if that felt like there was the right pace or not. Dave, the cell for H5 specifically was right here. And let's see. And Russell, hopefully you got the screenshot you needed for that different cells as well for those first sections. Folks, thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to share a little bit with you. The end result is to have something that you can turn to go ahead and make these changes and adjustments. And then again, you can swing back over to the Fidelity Stock Screener, update your data from here just by downloading it and dropping that into whatever folder, overwriting the old screener results. And just like that, you're ready to go ahead and update. Final step to update that again was to go back to your demo or to your actual file you've done all your work in. Anywhere on this first page, you just right click anywhere in it and hit refresh, and the data is brand newly updated. So that's all it takes. Phenomenal opportunity for you to find trends and observations in data. If you'd like to see a little bit more about how this could be useful, we'll be talking more about the usage of this, and I show my own completed version in my Wednesday class, Jake Talks Sectors. I'd love to see you there. But until then, thank you again for sticking with me in a grueling 1 hour running through this. LJ, you were wondering how to get back to Power Query. If you had to edit it again, you have to right click on your table and hit Table, then Edit Query. Or if you're saying, how do you get there the first place? That was up here at the top, Data, Get Data, and specifically, we use the From file from Excel workbook, though these others would also launch your Power Query. Here's the other option to get to the Power Query editor. So hopefully that helps. Folks, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. If there's any other comments, I'll go through and read them behind the scenes, but thank you again for your time. Take care. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone.